Do you remember the African-American Christmas breakfasts no one makes anymore? Christmas mornings once filled homes with warmth, laughter, and the smell of food made with love. When did we let those soulful mornings fade from our tables? Sweet potato biscuits with molasses were the heart of Christmas mornings, soft, spiced, and full of warmth that felt like family. Grandparents mashed leftover sweet potatoes into flour and lard, mixing with gentle hands that had seen both struggle and celebration. The dough came together smooth and bright, its color glowing like sunrise. When the biscuits baked, the air filled with sweetness and spice, wrapping the house in comfort. Once they came out golden, hot molasses was poured slow, dark as honey and twice as rich. It soaked into every crumb, glistening under the light of the kitchen window. Each bite tasted like joy remembered, soft on the tongue, but heavy with meaning. Families gathered around the table, breaking bread with laughter and gratitude. Sweet potato biscuits were not just breakfast, they were love served warm, proof that even in humble kitchens, the holidays could feel grand. Salmon, croquettes, and grits were the Christmas breakfast that made everyone feel rich, even when times were lean. Grandparents opened a can of salmon, mixed it with onions, cornmeal, and a little egg, then shaped it into perfect patties. They fried them in a cast-iron skillet until golden, the edges crisp and crackling. The smell was buttery and bold, filling the air with promise. Served over creamy, slow-cooked grits, the croquettes glistened under a drizzle of hot sauce or melted butter. It was a meal that spoke of care and ingenuity, turning pantry staples into celebration. The first bite melted between salt and comfort, smoky fish meeting the silk of the grits. It was both breakfast and blessing, the kind that stayed in memory long after the plates were cleared. On Christmas morning, it reminded families that joy didn't come from wealth, but from the love stirred into the skillet. Buttermilk pancakes with sorghum syrup were the taste of Southern Christmas mornings, sweet, warm, and steady. Grandparents stirred batter smooth in a big bowl, the sound of the whisk keeping rhythm with gospel playing low on the radio. The griddle hissed as each ladle of batter hit, spreading into circles that browned just right. When stacked high, the pancakes steamed like soft clouds waiting for the pour. Sorghum syrup, thick and dark, flowed slow over the top, pooling in the edges. Its taste was deep, old-fashioned, with hints of caramel and smoke. Families gathered sleepy-eyed around the table, watching the syrup drip and laughing softly at the morning quiet. Every forkful was sweet and grounding, comfort that didn't need decoration. Pancakes were never just pancakes. They were a small promise of good things ahead, a Christmas tradition that spoke of love more than luxury. Country ham and red-eye gravy brought a different kind of Christmas flavor, bold, smoky, and unforgettable. Grandparents fried thick slices of ham until the edges crisped, then poured in strong black coffee to make the gravy. The sizzle was sharp, the smell rich and salty with a whisper of bitterness. The gravy was thin, almost see-through, but it carried flavor strong enough to wake the soul. Poured over biscuits or grits, it turned breakfast into something fierce and proud. It was food for people who worked hard, who earned their rest on cold winter mornings. The taste of ham met the bite of coffee in a balance that only tradition could teach. It wasn't sweet or fancy, it was real. Country ham and red-eye gravy reminded everyone that even leftover meat could become something special when cooked with skill and care. It was strength served on a plate. Hog maw and potatoes was a breakfast that carried both weight and flavor for households that needed energy for the day ahead. Hog maw, or hog stomach, was cleaned carefully, seasoned, and slow-cooked until tender. Potatoes were added to the pot, soaking up the rich broth and spices as they simmered together. The result was a dish that was hearty, savory, and deeply satisfying, often eaten in large portions to provide strength before long hours in the fields or factories. Though not a delicacy, it was respected because it made use of parts of the hog that otherwise might have been discarded. The combination of meat and potatoes provided both protein and comfort, ensuring that families started their mornings with something filling. Hog maw and potatoes reflected resilience, turning less desirable cuts into meals that carried pride and tradition. Though it is rarely seen on tables today, it once served as a dependable morning staple. Fried apples with cinnamon turned Christmas mornings into something golden and sweet. Grandparents peeled the apples thin, letting them fall into a skillet of melted butter and sugar. The sizzle was gentle, like music in the background of a winter morning. Cinnamon and nutmeg dusted over top filled the room with spice and memory. The apples softened slow, turning syrupy and caramelized, their scent seeping through the house. Served warm beside biscuits, sausage, or pancakes, they brought dessert to breakfast. Each spoonful felt like sunlight after cold nights, simple, shining, and kind. The flavor lingered long after the plate was empty, wrapping the heart in warmth. Fried apples weren't fancy, but they were love in its purest form, the kind passed from pan to pan across generations. Grandparents often saved the syrup from the pan, drizzling it over biscuits so not a drop went to waste. It was a taste of patience and pride, proof that sweetness could always be found even in the simplest kitchens. The smell stayed in the air like a song that never ended, marking every Christmas morning with the same golden glow. Liver pudding with cornbread was a breakfast that made use of both thrift and tradition. Liver pudding, made from ground pork liver mixed with spices and grain, was sliced and fried until warm and fragrant. Served alongside crumbled cornbread, it created a dish that was hearty, filling, and economical. Though the flavor was bold, it was respected as a nutritious way to stretch meat and ensure nothing went to waste. African American kitchens relied on dishes like this to feed large families affordably, making liver pudding a familiar sight at the morning table. The pairing with cornbread added comfort and balance, giving a soft texture to go with the savory richness of the pudding. For many, this dish was a reminder of resilience and resourcefulness. Though it is rarely prepared today, liver pudding with cornbread once carried both pride and practicality in every bite. Rice porridge with butter and sugar was quiet comfort, the kind of breakfast that soothed cold Christmas mornings. Grandparents simmered leftover rice in milk until it softened into a creamy base. A spoonful of butter melted on top, swirling gold into white. Sugar sprinkled over it turned the first bite into nostalgia, sweet, soft, and warm. It filled the stomach and calmed the spirit, a meal that asked for nothing but a slow moment. Some added cinnamon, others raisins, but the magic was in the simplicity. It was food that wrapped you up like a blanket, reminding you that even leftovers could feel like luxury when made with love. Families sat close, sharing stories between bites, steam rising from their bowls. Rice porridge with butter and sugar wasn't loud or showy, it was memory itself, humble and full of grace. Cabbage and ham hock stew was a breakfast that filled both stomachs and spirits. Cabbage, inexpensive and abundant, was simmered with ham hocks until tender and flavorful. The broth became rich with the smoky, salty essence of the ham, while the cabbage absorbed every bit of taste. Potatoes, onions, or other vegetables were sometimes added to stretch the stew further, making it both practical and hearty. Families ate it hot in the morning, ensuring they had enough fuel for long days in the fields or at work. The dish was economical, making use of inexpensive cuts of meat that might otherwise be overlooked. Yet it carried pride too, as it transformed humble ingredients into something comforting and sustaining. Cabbage and ham hock stew showed the ingenuity of African American cooks who knew how to bring depth of flavor from even the simplest foods. Though forgotten by many, it was once a breakfast that symbolized strength and tradition. Homemade sausage patties filled the house with a smell that felt like joy itself. Grandparents seasoned ground pork with sage, pepper, and salt, mixing it slow by hand. They shaped the meat into patties and laid them in a hot skillet, the sizzle echoing through the kitchen. The grease popped, the air thick with spice and smoke. Each patty browned perfectly, crisp on the edges, tender inside. Served beside biscuits or grits, they became the centerpiece of Christmas breakfast. The flavor was warm and full-bodied, carrying a balance of salt and heat that felt like comfort itself. These sausages didn't come from a store. They came from love, from knowledge passed down through generations. Families sat close, plates piled high, laughter ringing through the air. Homemade sausage patties weren't just breakfast, they were the sound and smell of home on Christmas morning. Fried catfish and cornbread was a breakfast plate that reflected the abundance of rivers and the skill of African American cooks in the South. Catfish could be caught at little cost, cleaned, coated in cornmeal, and fried crisp in cast-iron skillets. Paired with hot cornbread fresh from the oven, the meal was both hearty and nourishing. It gave workers the energy needed for long days in the fields, and children the strength to get through school without hunger. Families often made it on weekends when fishing provided enough to share with neighbors, turning it into a communal meal. The taste was bold and rustic, with a combination of crunchy fish and soft bread that defined comfort. Though fish is not often associated with breakfast today, fried catfish and cornbread once stood proudly on morning tables. It remains a reflection of resilience and resourcefulness, showing how nature and tradition came together to sustain communities. Catfish and grits turned holiday mornings into celebration. Grandparents cleaned and seasoned each fillet with salt, pepper, and cornmeal before lowering it gently into hot oil. The fish crackled and hissed, the air thick with the smell of golden perfection. Grits cooked slow beside it, creamy and patient, waiting for the fish to crown the bowl. A pat of butter melted on top, running down like sunshine. It was a meal that carried pride, a taste of the South at its finest. The crisp of the catfish met the smooth comfort of the grits, rich and humble all at once. Families gathered around the table, laughing, praying, and passing plates. It wasn't fancy, it was full. Every bite was gratitude, every crumb a memory. Catfish and grits were proof that simple food could carry the weight of joy, tradition, and love in equal measure. Sweet potato coffee cake was a breakfast that carried warmth, thrift, and community in every slice. Families would mash leftover sweet potatoes into the batter, seasoning it with cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes cloves before baking it in heavy cast-iron pans that gave it a perfect crust. The result was moist and spiced, with a natural sweetness that came not from sugar, but from the potatoes themselves, making it both healthy and filling. It was often served at church gatherings or Sunday breakfasts when a little something special was needed on the table to bring people together. The dish reflected African American traditions of stretching what was available into something memorable, proving that nothing went to waste in kitchens where creativity was survival. Sweet potatoes were plentiful and affordable, making them an easy way to feed a family while also adding vitamins and nourishment to the meal. The cake was often paired with coffee, hot milk, or even molasses drinks, making it a centerpiece of mornings that were simple yet comforting. Though it is rarely baked today, this coffee cake once carried generations through hard times and sweet mornings alike, leaving memories of warmth, family, and resilience with every bite. Baked cinnamon apples and raisins brought Christmas mornings to life with a smell that felt like home. Grandparents sliced soft red apples, tossing them with butter, brown sugar, and a handful of raisins in an old baking dish. The oven worked slow, turning everything tender and golden, the edges bubbling with caramelized syrup. The scent of cinnamon filled every corner, warm and familiar. It was a dish that didn't need luxury, only love and patience. Served warm, it tasted like memory. Sweet, rich, and comforting in its simplicity. Children spooned it over biscuits or ate it plain, steam rising as they smiled through each bite. It was dessert for breakfast, comfort for cold mornings, and love disguised as thrift. Baked cinnamon apples and raisins reminded families that Christmas joy could come from the simplest things pulled from a pantry and shared with care. Chitlin scramble was one of those breakfasts that spoke directly to resourcefulness and resilience. Chitlins, or pig intestines, were cleaned thoroughly, boiled until tender, and then chopped into small pieces. They were folded into scrambled eggs with onions, creating a dish that was both filling and flavorful. The onions added sweetness, the eggs brought balance, and the chitlins gave a richness that turned the plate into something hearty. Though chitlins are often remembered as a holiday food today, many families once ate them regularly because they were inexpensive and ensured that no part of the hog was wasted. For farm workers and laborers, A plate of Chitlin scramble gave strength before long hours of work. It was not a fancy breakfast, but it was deeply tied to survival and tradition. The aroma filled kitchens, and though strong, it carried memories of both family gatherings and everyday meals. Chitlin scramble represented more than food. It was heritage served hot on the morning table. Smothered pork chops with onions turned breakfast into celebration. Grandparents browned the chops in a cast-iron skillet, letting the onions caramelize slow in their drippings. Flour and broth thickened the mix into gravy, smooth and rich. The smell filled the kitchen. Sweet onions, savory meat, and love mingling in the air. Served over grits or rice, it became the kind of meal you remembered long after. It was the taste of family gathered close, of warmth against winter cold. Each forkful carried tenderness and tradition, the flavors deep as memory. Smothered pork chops were Sunday food, but on Christmas morning, they were grace itself, rich, golden, and full of heart. Every bite felt like a thank you to those who came before, who taught that food was more than sustenance. It was love made visible. Pickled pig's feet with rice was a breakfast plate that blended tang, tradition, thrift, and a powerful sense of cultural memory. Pig's feet were boiled, seasoned with spices, and pickled in vinegar, creating a dish that was both flavorful and long-lasting in households where preservation was survival. Served cold from jars or warmed gently on the stove, they were paired with rice, which balanced the sharp tanginess and made the meal hearty enough to carry people through long days of labor. For families with limited resources, this dish ensured that every single part of the hog was used and nothing valuable went to waste. The pickling process preserved the meat, allowing it to last far beyond what fresh cuts could manage in kitchens without refrigeration. Though the flavor was bold, tough, and not to everyone's taste, it carried strong roots in African American food traditions shaped by necessity and resilience. Rice added comfort, balance, and affordability, turning the plate into a full meal that could feed many. Pickled pig's feet with rice was not just food, but a cultural marker of thrift and endurance. Though rarely eaten today, it once stood as an important morning staple. Cheese grits casserole was the Southern gift that made Christmas brunch feel complete. Grandparents mixed slow-cooked grits with butter, eggs, and a mountain of shredded cheese until the pot turned golden and glossy. Poured into a baking dish, it went into the oven to rise, the top forming a soft crust that bubbled at the edges. When it came out, the house filled with the scent of warmth and home. The casserole was creamy and rich, each spoonful smooth like velvet, with a hint of salt and sharp cheddar. It was shared at tables surrounded by cousins, friends, and faith. Served beside ham, sausage, or fried apples, it tied every plate together. Cheese grits casserole wasn't just food, it was comfort made tangible, the taste of Christmas morning and all its quiet joy. Even the leftovers felt like love reheated. The way it held heat long after leaving the oven made it the heart of every brunch table. Grandparents would scoop it proudly, watching butter melt into every golden layer. It was both humble and grand, a dish that felt like sunlight on a cold morning. Cheese grits casserole carried the story of the South, slow-cooked, soulful, and full of love that lingered in every bite. Cornmeal mush with sorghum syrup was a staple breakfast that reflected the creativity and resilience of African American kitchens in the South and beyond. The mush itself was simple, made from cornmeal cooked slowly with water or milk until it thickened into a smooth porridge that filled bowls generously. On its own, it was filling but plain, so families would drizzle sorghum syrup over the top to add sweetness and richness without needing expensive sugar. Sorghum was cheaper, widely available in the South, and deeply tied to farm life, making it a household staple for generations of working families. This dish was eaten hot at the table with spoons, sometimes with butter or milk added, or cooled in pans and sliced to be fried later as griddle cakes. For children, it was a comfort food that brought both energy and warmth on school mornings when bellies needed to be full. For adults, it was a dependable way to stretch limited supplies into a hearty start to the day, ensuring no one went hungry. Cornmeal mush with sorghum syrup was never fancy, but it was practical, satisfying, and deeply tied to the rhythm of working life. Cane syrup biscuits were a breakfast treat that balanced simplicity with pure comfort. Biscuits were baked fresh, sometimes from scratch and sometimes from canned dough, then served with thick cane syrup poured generously over the top. The syrup was dark, sweet, and sticky, a regional staple that families could rely on when sugar and jams were too costly. The combination of flaky bread and syrup was both filling and indulgent, giving mornings a sense of celebration, even during lean times. For children, it was a sweet start to the day that felt like dessert, while adults valued it as quick fuel before work. Cane syrup itself was a treasured pantry item, often stored in large tins and used sparingly to stretch across weeks. Biscuits with cane syrup were not just food, but a reminder of family kitchens and the traditions that bound them together. Today, it is rarely seen, but it once carried both joy and survival in every bite. Hot water cornbread and scrambled eggs was the breakfast of resilience and rhythm. Grandparents mixed cornmeal with hot water and salt, shaping small patties that sizzled as they hit the skillet. Crisp on the outside, soft inside, they were fried until golden brown. The eggs cooked beside them, fluffy, warm, and bright yellow against the dark cast iron. The smell of the two together filled the kitchen with home. Hot water cornbread didn't need butter or sugar. Its flavor came from simplicity and care. Eaten with eggs and maybe a dab of syrup, it felt like peace on a plate. On Christmas morning, it was the kind of meal that brought everyone to the table early, eager and grateful. It was the art of doing much with little, a Southern masterpiece born of patience and heart. Grandparents flipped the patties with practiced ease, knowing exactly when the crust was perfect. The sound of frying filled the kitchen, steady as a heartbeat. Every bite tasted like history and hope. Humble ingredients turned into something lasting and proud. Souse meat with eggs was a breakfast that showed how African-American cooks turned preservation into sustenance. Souse meat, made by boiling and seasoning pig parts into a gelatinous loaf, was sliced and fried in skillets until crisp at the edges. Served alongside eggs, it made for a hearty and protein-rich plate that was affordable for working families. The flavors were strong and savory, with vinegar and spice balancing the richness of the pork. Souse meat was common because it allowed families to preserve cuts that might otherwise go to waste, ensuring nothing was lost. For children, the texture could be unusual, but it was familiar to those who grew up with it as part of the household routine. Adults appreciated its practicality, especially when paired with eggs that added bulk to the meal. Though it has faded from most breakfast tables, souse meat with eggs once reflected resilience, tradition, and the unyielding ability to make much from little. Okra fritters were once a common breakfast food that made use of one of the most iconic crops in African American gardens. Fresh okra would be chopped, mixed with cornmeal and seasoning, and fried in small patties until golden brown. The result was crisp on the outside, tender on the inside, and full of earthy flavor that paired perfectly with hot coffee or milk. For families, okra fritters were both affordable and filling, using whatever the garden provided in abundance. They could be eaten plain with cane syrup or alongside eggs, making them versatile as well as practical. The dish reflected the deep agricultural roots of African American communities, where nothing grown went to waste. It was also a way of starting the day with something satisfying before long hours of labor. While okra remains popular in Southern cooking, the fritter form has faded from breakfast tables, leaving behind only the memory of mornings built on thrift and flavor. Wild berry dumplings were a breakfast that came directly from the land. Foraged berries like blackberries, blueberries, or mulberries were gathered in the early morning, often by children who knew where the best patches grew. The berries were simmered into a sweet syrup, and then simple dumplings made from flour and water were dropped into the pot. As they cooked, the dumplings soaked up the berry flavor, becoming plump, soft, and comforting. This was not a dish you would find in restaurants, but one that carried the taste of summer mornings in rural communities. It was affordable, relying only on what nature provided and a handful of pantry staples. Families looked forward to it during berry season, enjoying a breakfast that blended sweetness and tradition. The dumplings were eaten straight from bowls, sometimes with a little milk poured over the top to stretch the meal further. Wild berry dumplings were proof that even foraged food could feel like a feast. Rice and molasses porridge was a breakfast that brought together comfort and thrift in one pot. Leftover rice was simmered slowly with water or milk until soft and creamy. Then molasses was stirred in for sweetness. The result was warm, filling, and affordable, giving families energy to start the day. Molasses was cheaper than refined sugar, and rice stretched further than bread, making this dish a natural fit for households trying to feed many mouths on little money. The flavor was rich and slightly tangy, a taste that children grew up associating with home and tradition. For adults, it was a reminder of both comfort and necessity, as it made use of ingredients that were always on hand. Rice and molasses porridge was a simple bowl, but it carried both nourishment and memory. Families ate it hot, often in large servings, to keep them going through long mornings. It was one of those breakfasts that disappeared quietly, yet left a strong mark in memory. Molasses-dipped apples were a simple but cherished breakfast treat that blended sweetness with thrift. Apples would be peeled, sliced, and simmered in thick molasses until tender and glossy. The result was both rich and comforting, often eaten alongside bread or biscuits for a balanced plate. Molasses was affordable and more accessible than refined sugar, making it a staple in many African American homes. Pairing it with apples, which were plentiful during the season, stretched the sweetness into something filling and satisfying. Children especially loved this dish, as it was one of the few ways to enjoy something sweet in the morning without the expense of store-bought goods. Adults valued it as an easy way to prepare fruit in a form that lasted longer. Molasses-dipped apples carried both comfort and practicality, standing as proof that even humble ingredients could bring warmth and joy to the table. Hogshead hash was a breakfast that spoke to the no-waste mentality of African American cooking traditions that valued resourcefulness and respect for food. When a hog was butchered, nothing was left unused, and the head provided meat that could be stewed, chopped, seasoned, and fried into hearty dishes. Families would mix the shredded meat with potatoes, onions, and sometimes peppers, then cook it together in a skillet until browned, crispy, and richly flavored. The flavor was intense, smoky, and savory, and it filled the house with a smell that lingered long after breakfast was finished. It was not just food, but a reminder of how creativity and resourcefulness made survival possible in communities where every scrap mattered. Children grew up eating it without complaint because it was hearty, flavorful, and kept them full through school, farm work, or chores. Adults relied on it as a way to honor the animal by using every part of it, ensuring nothing went to waste. Though hog's head hash has nearly vanished from today's kitchens, it once stood as a powerful symbol of resilience, thrift, and respect for tradition that sustained families. Red gravy with rice was a breakfast dish that combined economy with comfort in African American households. The gravy was made from tomatoes, onions, and seasoning, simmered until thick and poured over steaming rice. It was filling, affordable, and deeply satisfying, providing warmth and energy to carry through the day. For many families, rice was cheaper than bread and could be stretched to feed everyone, while tomatoes added both flavor and color. The dish was common across the South, where it became a daily staple for working people who needed hearty food before long hours of labor. Children often grew up with it as a familiar morning ritual, while adults valued its reliability and ease of preparation. Red gravy with rice was never fancy, but it symbolized resilience and the ability to make simple ingredients carry meaning. Though rarely served in breakfast form today, it was once a proud and practical tradition. Biscuits and chocolate gravy were childhood wonder poured straight from the pan. Grandparents stirred cocoa, milk, sugar, and flour together until it thickened into glossy sweetness. The smell was deep and rich, filling the kitchen like happiness itself. Hot biscuits came out of the oven, soft and split open, waiting for that warm chocolate flood. The gravy dripped down their sides, catching in cracks like treasure. Kids' eyes lit up. It was rare, a holiday gift made from humble ingredients. Sweet but not too rich, it tasted like joy and tenderness in every bite. Families gathered close, laughing and licking fingers, the sound of spoons scraping bowls like a song. For many, chocolate gravy wasn't just food, it was Christmas magic, fleeting and unforgettable. It was a reminder that the best gifts didn't come wrapped, but simmered slow on the stove, meant to be shared. Fried cabbage with bacon fat was never glamorous, but it was always good. It started as a way to stretch meals, turning a simple head of cabbage into something hearty and rich. The sizzling sound of bacon fat hitting the skillet was the beginning of flavor itself. When the cabbage went in, the kitchen filled with a smoky, savory aroma that made mouths water. Seasoned with salt, pepper, and maybe a little onion, it became one of the simplest yet most satisfying sides on the table. For Christmas, it sat alongside the big dishes, greens, dressing, sweet potatoes, holding its own through sheer honesty of taste. Cabbage was cheap and plentiful, but what made it special was the way it was cooked, with care, attention, and a little leftover bacon grease from breakfast. Every bite carried the taste of thrift and wisdom, proof that nothing in a good kitchen goes to waste. It was food that hugged you from the inside, a reminder that love can taste smoky, crispy, and full of soul. Caramel layer cake was the dessert that demanded patience and rewarded devotion. The caramel icing had to be stirred over low heat for what felt like forever, and the smell of sugar turning gold was pure heaven. One careless second, and it would burn. But when it came out right, it gleamed like amber. African American women guarded their caramel recipes like secrets, each one slightly different, perfected over decades of Christmas dinners. The cake itself was tender and buttery, but the icing was the soul of it, sweet, smoky, and just shy of bitter. Served on special occasions, it was a symbol of pride, proof that skill and care could turn a handful of ingredients into art. The first slice cut through the glossy top like glass, revealing soft layers that seemed to melt in the mouth. No factory-made dessert could ever match it. Caramel layer cake was love, labor, and legacy, all baked into one beautiful confection. Themed matching outfits turned living rooms into makeshift photo studios every Christmas. Families dressed in coordinated reds, greens, or golds, some handmade, others thrifted, but always perfect in spirit. Mothers often sewed late into the night, pinning hems and adjusting collars so everyone looked their best. Fathers would pretend to fuss about the matching sweaters, but when the camera flashed, they smiled the widest. The youngest kids wore ribbons or bow ties too big for their necks, and older siblings teased but secretly loved the attention. The flashbulb lit up faces full of laughter, the sound of soul music echoing in the background. Afterward, the family crowded around the Polaroid, waving it dry, waiting for the image to appear like magic. Matching outfits weren't about perfection. They were a family's way of saying, "We're together, we're proud, and we made it through another year." Those snapshots, imperfect and glowing, still hang in homes today. Cypress berry relish brought a sharp tang to otherwise plain meals by using the small, resin-scented berries of native cypress trees. Gatherers collected the ripe berries carefully, then simmered them with a little water and a drizzle of molasses when available, creating a dark, aromatic relish with a unique balance of sweet and bitter flavors. This condiment enlivened cornbread, stewed greens, or smoked fish, adding variety to a diet that often lacked spices. The recipe reflected African traditions of turning wild fruits into bold sauces, and also borrowed techniques from indigenous peoples who valued cypress for its medicinal properties. Though seldom made today, the memory of cypress berry relish lingers in regional stories of swamp foraging and resourceful cooking. It highlights how a deep understanding of the local ecosystem allowed people to transform unexpected ingredients into something flavorful and sustaining. Cypress berry relish stands as a tribute to both culinary creativity and the enduring connection between survival foods and the natural abundance of the southern wetlands. Tell us which survival food amazed you most, like this video, and subscribe to keep these powerful food traditions alive. Roasted acorns were a last resort food that demanded patience, persistence, and determination. Families gathered acorns from oak trees, leaching them in water to wash away their bitterness. Once roasted or ground into meal, they became a base for porridge, bread, or simple roasted snacks. The work was long, But the result was nourishment when no other options existed. Children often joined in the gathering, their small hands filling baskets that would help carry the family through another lean season. The flavor was earthy and nutty, reminding everyone of the forests that provided when store shelves could not. Housewives baked with acorn meal not out of choice, but out of survival, proving that even the hardest, most overlooked resource could be transformed into food. Roasted acorns are rarely spoken of now, but they represent a reality of the Jim Crow South, that people survived by using everything the land offered. They were sustenance born from endurance, and they kept families alive. Sweet potato biscuits were soft, golden, and kissed with just enough sweetness to make them feel special. They were the kind of side that showed up in baskets wrapped with cloth, still warm from the oven. The dough was simple: mashed sweet potatoes, flour, and a little butter. But the hands that made them turned them into something almost holy. Sweet potatoes added color and sweetness, the kind that lingered in the air when you opened the oven door. They were often brushed with butter and stacked high beside glazed hams or roasted chicken. These biscuits spoke to the ingenuity of home cooks who stretched ingredients and still made everything taste like comfort. At Christmas, they became a soft reminder of care, food meant to hold you together. They were served to guests as a sign of pride and to children as a sign of love. Even in lean years, someone always found a way to make a batch. The sweetness was a celebration in itself, something earned and shared. Their scent alone could fill a room with warmth, carrying a legacy of home, patience, and heart. Peanut brittle crackled like glass when broken, a sound that always announced the start of Christmas. Sugar boiled on the stove until golden, and roasted peanuts were stirred in fast, the smell filling the kitchen with toasted sweetness. You needed courage to make it. Just a few seconds too long, and it would scorch beyond repair. But when it turned out right, it shone like amber, sweet and sharp all at once. Every Southern Black household had someone who made it best, someone whose brittle snapped perfectly between the teeth. It was candy made with heart and heat, meant to be shared from tins wrapped in ribbon. The pieces stuck to your fingers and sometimes your teeth, but that only made it better. Peanut brittle was a labor of love, born of resourcefulness and shared as generosity. It wasn't bought, it was earned. Community potluck dinners turned church basements into banquets of generosity. Long folding tables overflowed with macaroni, fried chicken, collard greens, and sweet pies carried in from every home. The scent of spice and butter clung to the air, mixing with laughter and gospel tunes from an old speaker in the corner. Elders shared recipes and memories, passing plates as easily as conversation. Children darted between legs, stealing bites before grace was said. No one asked who brought what or how much. It was enough that everyone shared. When the meal was done, leftovers were packed in foil and sent home with whoever needed them most. The food nourished bodies, but the fellowship fed something deeper. It was community made visible. Love served family style, and faith lived out in flavor and care. Glazed carrots with molasses and brown sugar were once the crown jewel of Christmas sides. Before canned vegetables and store-bought glazes, these carrots gleamed on every holiday plate. The slow simmer of molasses and butter gave them a caramel richness that coated each bite in sweetness and shine. The brown sugar melted into the glaze, creating something that felt both simple and luxurious. It was the kind of dish that reminded families that even humble roots could taste like gold. Kids loved it because it was candy in disguise, while grown folks loved it because it felt like tradition. These carrots weren't about fancy presentation. They were about love cooked into every spoonful. For many Black families, molasses was more than flavor. It was a memory of survival, a sweetener when sugar was scarce. That made these carrots more than decoration. They were gratitude on a plate. The scent of molasses bubbling in the pan filled homes with warmth, a sign that celebration had begun. Today, the dish has faded, but for those who remember, its sweetness still lingers in memory like a song you never forget. Mulberry leaf wraps transformed young, tender leaves from the wild mulberry tree into clever edible packages. Foragers selected the freshest leaves in spring when they were soft and mild, then blanched them briefly to soften their texture. Cooked rice, seasoned vegetables, or small bits of preserved fish were spooned inside before the leaves were folded and steamed, creating tidy bundles filled with subtle, earthy flavor. This technique echoed African traditions of wrapping foods in leaves for both cooking and preservation, blending seamlessly with indigenous American practices. The result was a portable meal that required no extra containers and made use of a tree that also provided sweet berries later in the season. After emancipation, mulberry leaves continued to appear in Southern folk remedies and tea blends, but the memory of leaf-wrapped suppers remains a quiet testament to ingenuity. Mulberry leaf wraps illustrate how a single plant could meet many needs, offering nourishment, flavor, and practicality to communities that transformed every part of their environment into sustenance. Mustard and turnip greens mixed together made a tangy, peppery side that brought life to every plate. They were picked fresh from gardens behind the house or given by neighbors who always grew too much. Cooking them was a slow, loving process, cleaning, chopping, and simmering until tender with a pinch of salt and something smoky for depth. The combination of mustard and turnip greens balanced sharpness with comfort. Their flavor was bold, almost defiant, like the people who cooked them. These greens told a story of survival through simplicity, a reminder that good taste does not need wealth. At Christmas, they cut through the heaviness of rich meats and gravies, refreshing the palate and grounding the meal. Each bite held the brightness of vinegar and the bite of pepper, something sharp to remind you of life's strength even in hard times. Every family had its own way to cook them, some with a bit of onion, some with fatback, and some just with faith. The pot of greens sat at the back of the stove, bubbling steady like time itself, carrying the scent of home and history. Sorrel punch cake was the meeting of islands and America on one holiday table. The red petals of dried sorrel, hibiscus, were steeped into syrup, spiced with ginger and clove, and folded into a rich batter that turned the cake a deep crimson. For many African American families with Caribbean roots, this dessert was more than flavor. It was identity. It carried the tang of hibiscus, the warmth of spice, and the memory of Christmases celebrated across oceans. The aroma was intoxicating, filling kitchens with a scent equal parts floral and fiery. Once baked, it was brushed with more sorrel syrup, glossy and fragrant, a dessert that glowed like ruby glass. Sorrel punch cake connected people to ancestors who had used the same ingredients in a different land for the same reason, to celebrate surviving another year. It was history in sugar and spice, and every bite reminded you that culture can travel far, but it never fades. Pokeberry wine, carefully made from foraged berries, was not just a drink, but a folk remedy tied to survival. The deep purple berries, toxic if mishandled, were boiled and strained, creating a liquid believed to ease pain and treat ailments. In communities with little access to doctors, such home cures became essential. Families passed down recipes through generations, each step carefully guarded to avoid harm while drawing out the plant's healing potential. Housewives prepared it in small batches, knowing it was meant more for medicine than pleasure. Some elders took small sips daily, swearing by its ability to ease arthritis or calm nerves. The drink symbolized ingenuity, proof that even the wild and dangerous could be turned into something useful with knowledge and care. Children were warned never to eat the berries raw, but they grew up knowing the wine's importance to family survival. Though science later questioned its effectiveness, pokeberry wine was once a lifeline born from tradition and necessity. Collard greens with smoked ham hocks were the heart of Christmas cooking in countless African American homes. The greens simmered low and slow for hours, their earthy scent filling the kitchen long before dinner was ready. Ham hocks gave them depth, salt, and smoke, the kind of flavor that came only from patience and thrift. Every bite told a story of making something rich from what little you had. The pot itself was a gathering place, stirred by mothers, aunts, and grandmothers who knew the rhythm of seasoning by heart. These greens were not just food, they were a blessing on the table, a wish for good fortune in the coming year. In many families, a pot of greens sat beside cornbread and turkey, representing money, luck, and perseverance. During hard times, ham hocks were often saved or traded for, treated like gold. The aroma of collards became part of Christmas itself, a signal that family was near and that celebration could still be soulful even when pockets were thin. Cooking them meant remembering those who came before and honoring the work it took to put a meal together. Greens were a sermon in a pot. Humble ingredients turned sacred through care. Comment your favorite Christmas breakfast, like the video, and subscribe for more tastes of history and home.